A retired canine dog shows up at a children's hospital every day, drawn to a mysterious purpose. No one knows who he's visiting, until one doctor uncovers a heartbreaking connection that will change everything. What starts as a simple act of loyalty becomes the key to saving 2 lives, proving that sometimes healing comes from the most unexpected places. If you are new here, then please subscribe this channel and show thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's move to this wonderful story. At Riverstone Children's Hospital, the first light of dawn always brought a quiet hum of activity. The nurses and doctors moved through the halls with a familiar efficiency, ready to face the day. For Dr. Samuel Lewis, a pediatrician who had spent over a decade working in the oncology department, it was just another morning. However, this particular day would turn out to be anything but ordinary. Dr. Lewis pulled into his usual parking spot, the one he had claimed every day for the past 5 years. His tired eyes glanced at the dashboard, where a faded photograph of him and his daughter from their last camping trip rested in the corner of the windshield. He smiled briefly, his mind drifting away from the challenges of his work. But soon enough, the reality of the hospital pulled him back, and he grabbed his leather bag, stepping out of his car. As he entered the hospital, the familiar scent of antiseptic filled the air, and the soft murmur of the morning shift began. Nurses exchanged notes, orderlies wheeled breakfast carts, and children sat in their rooms awaiting the day's treatments. It was another routine day at Riverstone, or so it seemed. But something caught his eye. Standing just outside the hospital entrance, a German shepherd sat, looking up at the doors with calm, watchful eyes. Dr. Lewis paused. It wasn't the first time he had seen this dog. It had appeared several mornings now, always at the same time, as if it had a purpose. He watched for a moment, noting how the dog's weathered fur and strong, disciplined stance gave him the appearance of an animal with a history, an animal that had been trained for something far more than simply wandering the streets. The dog's collar was faded and worn, but there was something about the way it carried itself that seemed purposeful. Security guards were the first to notice the dog, and they moved quickly to shoo him away. Dr. Lewis saw one of the guards speak to the dog, but the shepherd didn't budge. Instead, he turned and trotted to the side of the building, disappearing behind a corner. The guard shrugged, thinking the issue was resolved, and went back to their duties. But as Dr. Lewis walked past the entrance again a few minutes later, there he was, back in the same spot. This time, Dr. Lewis stopped. There was no mistaking it. This dog wasn't just a stray. The way it sat, so still and focused, told him that this was no accident. It was clear the shepherd was here for a reason, and he couldn't shake the feeling that the dog was waiting for something, or someone. Throughout the morning, the dog continued his routine. He appeared at the same time, every time, and each time he was met with resistance from hospital staff who tried in vain to keep him away. Yet, the dog never left. His movements were so deliberate, as though he had made a commitment to be here, a promise he intended to keep. The dog's persistence intrigued Dr. Lewis, and he made a mental note to find out more about him. It wasn't until later that morning, after rounds and consultations, that Dr. Lewis had the opportunity to speak with Nurse Margaret Turner. Margaret had been working at Riverstone for years and had seen it all: sick children, frantic parents, and the daily cycle of hope and heartache. As Dr. Lewis passed her station, he paused to ask about the dog. "Margaret," he asked, "have you noticed that dog outside, the one that keeps coming back?" "Oh yes," she replied with a knowing smile. "He's been here the past few mornings. Security's been trying to get rid of him, but he always comes back. No one's really sure what he's doing here." "What's strange," Dr. Lewis mused, "is the way he acts. He doesn't just wander around like a stray. He moves like he has a purpose, like he's looking for someone." Margaret nodded. "I think he's been making his way around the children's ward. I saw him by the oncology unit yesterday. It's like he's visiting certain rooms." That comment caught Dr. Lewis's attention. The oncology ward was where some of the most fragile children were treated, those who were fighting aggressive cancers. For the dog to be drawn there day after day seemed too coincidental. He wondered if the dog might have some sort of connection to the hospital, though it was hard to imagine how. "Have you heard anything about a dog visiting the children?" Dr. Lewis asked, his mind turning over the possibility. Margaret thought, for a moment before replying. I've heard a few of the nurses talking about it. They say the dog seems to know which rooms to visit, especially the kids who are struggling the most. It's almost like he's helping them. The more Dr. Lewis thought about it, the more curious he became. He decided to take a few minutes between appointments to visit the oncology unit himself. As he walked through the ward, he observed the children who were too weak to get out of bed, some of them hooked up to IVs and monitors. It was a place of both hope and despair, and it weighed heavily on his heart. Yet something about the atmosphere changed when he passed by room 307, where a young girl named Emma was undergoing treatment. There, standing by her bedside, was the German Shepherd. The dog was lying quietly on the floor, as if watching over her, his eyes soft and caring. Emma's mother, Ellen, sat in the chair next to her daughter, and she seemed calm for the first time in days. The dog's presence was having an undeniable effect. Dr. Lewis didn't want to disturb the peaceful moment, so he quietly stepped back, letting the dog do what he seemed to do best: offer comfort, without words. Later that day, as Dr. Lewis sat at his desk reviewing patient files, he couldn't shake the image of the German Shepherd by Emma's side. There was something profound about it. The dog wasn't just visiting the hospital. It was offering something no medicine could, something deeper than physical care. In that moment, Dr. Lewis began to realize that this dog's visits were more than just a coincidence. They were a message, and he was determined to find out just what that message was. He made up his mind. He would investigate the dog's origins, and he would uncover the story behind this unexpected visitor who had found his way into the hearts of the children at Riverstone Children's Hospital. The following days brought with them a growing sense of mystery that lingered in the air at Riverstone Children's Hospital. Dr. Samuel Lewis couldn't shake the image of the German Shepherd, Thor, sitting patiently by the windows of the oncology ward. It wasn't just that the dog seemed to know which rooms to visit. It was the way he seemed to connect with the children in a way no one could explain. Thor's presence was calm, yet purposeful, as though he understood the pain these children were facing and had made it his mission to offer some form of comfort. Dr. Lewis decided to dig deeper. He started asking around, speaking to the nurses and security staff who had been dealing with Thor's daily visits. He learned that the dog had been coming to the hospital for nearly a week now, always at the same time, and always with the same quiet, determined demeanor. No one knew exactly who owned him or where he came from, but the more Dr. Lewis inquired, the more he felt that this dog had a story of his own, one that needed to be uncovered. One afternoon, as Dr. Lewis sat down for his usual coffee break, Nurse Margaret Turner approached him with a curious expression on her face. She had been one of the first to notice Thor's repeated appearances around the hospital. Margaret had been at Riverstone for years and had seen all kinds of unusual events, but this one seemed different. The dog, after all, wasn't just another stray. He was a trained animal. Of that much she was certain. Dr. Lewis, Margaret began, her voice low. I think I found something interesting. Dr. Lewis looked up from his coffee cup, intrigued. What do you mean? Well, she continued, I did a little digging on the dog. I wasn't sure at first, but I think I figured it out. Dr. Lewis's interest piqued, and he set his coffee aside. Go on. The dog's collar, Margaret explained. It's from a police department. I did a little research and found that Thor is actually a retired K9 unit dog from the Easton Police Department. He worked with Officer Peter Lawson. Dr. Lewis frowned, surprised by the revelation. A police dog? Yes, Margaret nodded. And from what I've gathered, Officer Lawson was critically injured about 6 months ago in an accident. He was hit by a drunk driver while he was saving a young girl. I think that girl was one of our patients, Emma Peterson. The mention of Emma caught Dr. Lewis off guard. He had been treating Emma for months now. She was a bright young girl, just 8 years old, battling leukemia with everything she had. But there was something else Dr. Lewis hadn't known. Her connection to Thor, the dog that had been visiting her regularly. So, Thor was with Officer Lawson when the accident happened? Dr. Lewis asked, his mind racing to piece everything together. Margaret nodded again. From what I've been told, Thor was by Lawson's side when he was hit by the car. The officer tried to push the girl out of the way, but he couldn't save himself. Thor, though, stayed by Lawson's side through it all. After the accident, Lawson was transferred to a rehabilitation center, but Thor, well, he never left. And now he's here, Dr. Lewis murmured, the pieces falling into place. He's been visiting Emma, but why? What is he doing here, and why has he been coming every day? Margaret looked thoughtful. I don't think Thor is just visiting Emma. I think he's still trying to help his partner. The bond between a police dog and his handler is unlike anything I've seen. It's more than just training, it's loyalty, it's understanding. Thor probably senses that Lawson's recovery is going to be a long road. Maybe he believes he can help both of them by being here with Emma. She's the reason Lawson is injured in the first place, after all. Dr. Lewis sat back in his chair, processing what Margaret had said. Everything about Thor's behavior made more sense now. The dog's daily visits weren't random. They were part of a larger, deeply ingrained sense of duty and care. Thor had been helping Lawson for years, keeping him safe, and now he was trying to do the same for Emma. The loyalty the dog felt toward his former partner was being redirected toward the young girl, who had unknowingly become a part of the story after the accident. This is extraordinary, Dr. Lewis said softly. The bond between Officer Lawson and Thor. It's something beyond what we usually see in animals. Margaret smiled gently. I think Thor knows that Emma needs him. And it's not just the kids in oncology that Thor visits. I've seen him around the rehab unit too. I think he's been checking in on Lawson as well. And Lawson? Does he know Thor is here? Dr. Lewis asked, his curiosity growing even stronger. I'm not sure, Margaret replied. I think Thor might be sneaking away from his rehab to visit the hospital. I heard from the staff at the rehab center that Thor has been restless, like he's been searching for something. Maybe it's been Emma all along. Dr. Lewis felt a sense of awe at the connection unfolding before him. Thor wasn't just a dog. He was a bridge between two lives that had been changed forever by one fateful accident. The dog's determination to help both Officer Lawson and Emma was beyond anything Dr. Lewis could have imagined. He stood up, his mind racing with new possibilities. I need to speak to Officer Lawson. I need to hear his side of the story. As Dr. Lewis walked toward his office, he couldn't help but wonder about the extraordinary impact a dog could have on the lives of those around him. Thor had already become a symbol of loyalty, of healing, and of the power of connection. And in that moment, Dr. Lewis realized that the true power of healing wasn't just in the medicine. It was in the bonds that formed between people, and between a person and a dog who refused to let go. The days at Riverstone Children's Hospital had grown longer, and the air seemed to thicken with a quiet anticipation. Thor, the German Shepherd, continued his daily visits with unwavering consistency. Dr. Samuel Lewis, once skeptical, now found himself in awe of the profound impact Thor was having on the children, and particularly on Emma Peterson, the young girl who had been fighting leukemia for months. Each day, Thor would arrive with calm determination, making his rounds through the children's oncology unit, visiting Emma and other patients who seemed to need him most. It wasn't just the comfort of his presence that made a difference. There was something deeper, something unspoken that connected Thor with those who needed healing. Dr. Lewis had been watching Thor's visits closely, and as the weeks passed, something remarkable began to happen. Emma, who had once been pale and weak, started showing signs of improvement. Her once listless eyes began to brighten when Thor was near, and even her doctors noticed a shift. Her blood counts were improving, her energy was returning, and her mother, Ellen, couldn't hide her gratitude for the dog's constant presence. It was as though Thor's loyalty was becoming a key part of Emma's treatment, not just physically but emotionally as well. Dr. Lewis sat in his office, reviewing Emma's latest test results. He had always been a man of science, focused on numbers and data. But as he looked over the latest reports, something was different. Emma's numbers were improving faster than expected, and it wasn't just due to the chemotherapy. Her doctors had been able to adjust her treatment plan, but it was Thor's visits that seemed to provide an intangible form of healing. It wasn't just the medicine, it was the connection, the bond, the simple act of being there for someone when they needed it most. He thought back to Officer Peter Lawson, the former K-9 handler who had been injured in the same accident that had brought Emma to Riverstone. Dr. Lewis had met with Lawson a few days ago, and the officer's story had stayed with him. Lawson had been a dedicated officer, and his bond with Thor had been unbreakable. After the accident, Lawson had struggled with his recovery, feeling lost and uncertain. But Thor's loyalty had never wavered. The dog had stayed by Lawson's side, refusing to leave, and in doing so had given him the strength to keep going. Dr. Lewis had noticed something subtle when he spoke to Lawson. There was a quiet hope in his voice, a determination that had been reignited by Thor's presence. Officer Lawson's rehabilitation was progressing slowly, but he was improving. And as Dr. Lewis had seen, Thor was a part of that journey. The dog had become a constant companion in Lawson's recovery, visiting him every day in the rehab center and offering the same silent support that he had given Emma. It was clear to Dr. Lewis now, Thor wasn't just helping Emma. He was helping Lawson too. The dog was bridging two worlds, bringing healing to both a child and a man who had been forever changed by the same tragedy. As Thor continued his visits, Dr. Lewis began to recognize the deeper impact of what he was witnessing. He could see it in the faces of the children who lit up when Thor entered their rooms. He could hear it in the conversations among the hospital staff, who had started to notice the improvements in the children's well-being when Thor was around. He could feel it in the air. There was something about the dog that transcended the traditional methods of healing. One afternoon, as Dr. Lewis made his rounds, he noticed a small group of nurses gathered by the window overlooking the hospital courtyard. Thor had just finished his rounds in the children's ward and was now sitting by the garden waiting patiently. Dr. Lewis walked over to the nurses, curious about the excitement in their voices. "You won't believe it, Dr. Lewis," Nurse Rebecca said, her eyes wide with amazement. "The kids in the oncology ward, they're all asking for Thor. They've been talking about him all morning, and the doctors? They're actually seeing improvements in their vitals when he's around." Dr. Lewis watched Thor from the window, the dog sitting with a quiet dignity as the children gathered around him in the garden. He couldn't deny it any longer. The dog's presence was having a profound effect. It wasn't just a fluke. Something about Thor's visits was helping the children to heal, physically and emotionally. "I think we're seeing something extraordinary here," Dr. Lewis said, his voice quiet with realization. "This is more than just animal-assisted therapy. Thor is providing a kind of emotional support that these children, and Officer Lawson, desperately need. His loyalty, his presence, it's doing something we can't measure in medical charts, but it's real." The nurses nodded in agreement, their faces reflecting the same awe that Dr. Lewis was feeling. "We've seen it too," Rebecca continued. "The kids, especially Emma, they're responding to him in ways we can't explain. They're smiling more, they're asking to get out of bed. It's like Thor gives them the strength to fight." Dr. Lewis stood for a moment, watching Thor interact with the children below. The dog's calm demeanor and attentive eyes made it clear that he understood more than most could. He wasn't just a dog. He was a symbol of hope, of loyalty, and of healing. And as Dr. Lewis thought about Thor's journey, he realized something else. The dog had brought him closer to understanding something he had spent years avoiding: the power of human connection. As Thor made his way back toward the rehab center later that afternoon, Dr. Lewis felt a wave of gratitude. He had always relied on medicine to do the healing, but now he understood that true healing could be found in the connections between people, animals, and the bonds they formed. The road to recovery wasn't always about treatment plans or medical procedures. It was about finding the strength to keep going, even when everything seemed impossible. Thor had given Emma, Officer Lawson, and the hospital staff a gift that couldn't be measured in any chart or study. He had given them hope. And as Dr. Lewis walked through the halls of Riverstone, he couldn't help but feel that the hospital had become a place where healing was no longer just about fighting illness. It was about fighting together. Patient, doctor, and dog, all part of the same journey. As the weeks passed, Riverstone Children's Hospital became a different place. The air, once thick with the tension of medical uncertainty, now held a quieter sense of peace. Thor, the German Shepherd, had become a permanent fixture in the lives of the children in the oncology ward. His daily visits had transcended the simple comfort of a therapy dog. He was now an integral part of the healing process. Dr. Samuel Lewis watched all of this unfold, unable to deny the transformative effect Thor had on the hospital. The connection between Thor, Emma Peterson, and Officer Peter Lawson had woven a web of healing that no one had expected, and it was beginning to reach its natural conclusion, though not without leaving lasting change in its wake. It wasn't just Emma who had benefited from Thor's visits. The children who had been too weak to leave their beds or too afraid to smile were showing signs of improvement. Dr. Lewis had seen it firsthand. More laughter in the halls, more hope in the eyes of parents, and a renewed sense of purpose in the medical staff. Thor's presence had become something more than a form of animal-assisted therapy. It had become a reminder to everyone in the hospital that healing was about more than just medicine. It was about connection, love, and presence. But as much as Thor had helped the children, his journey was not yet complete. Officer Lawson, who had spent months recovering from his own traumatic injury, was nearing a crucial point in his rehabilitation. His progress had been slow, but with Thor by his side, Lawson had found the strength to push forward. His physical therapist, Dr. Francesca Livingston, had noticed a steady improvement in his mobility. He was no longer confined to a wheelchair full-time, and his upper body strength was growing stronger with each passing day. Yet it was Thor's unwavering loyalty that had made all the difference. The dog had been Lawson's constant companion, offering him the emotional support he needed to continue fighting, even when it seemed impossible. Dr. Lewis had noticed the change in Lawson. The officer, once quiet and withdrawn, was now more confident and engaged. Thor had not only helped him recover physically, but had given him back a sense of purpose. Lawson had gone from being a man who thought his life was over to someone who now saw a future filled with possibilities. And now, with Emma's recovery progressing as well, the time had come for the two to finally meet face to face. It was a warm afternoon when Dr. Lewis arranged the meeting between Lawson and Emma. The hospital had cleared the recreation room, creating a space for the two to meet properly. Emma was excited but nervous. She had heard stories about Officer Lawson and how he had saved her life, but she hadn't fully understood the depth of their connection until now. Lawson, too, had his reservations. Though he had been asking about Emma for months, he wasn't sure how she would react to seeing him in a wheelchair. He had never thought of himself as a hero, just a man who had done his job. But meeting the young girl he had saved was a different kind of challenge. Dr. Lewis stood by the door of the recreation room, watching as Thor led Lawson into the room. The dog's presence was as reassuring as ever, his calm demeanor putting both Emma and Lawson at ease. When Emma saw Lawson, her face lit up with recognition. She had always known Thor was part of her story, but now, seeing the man behind the dog, she could connect the dots in a way she hadn't before. "You're the one who saved me," Emma said softly, her voice full of wonder. "Thank you." Lawson, his eyes softening, smiled at her. "I just did what needed to be done. But I'm glad I could help. I'm glad you're still here." The exchange was simple, yet it carried an emotional weight that none of them could ignore. It was the beginning of something profound, the meeting of two lives that had been forever changed by an act of heroism and an unwavering bond between a dog and his handler. As the meeting continued, Lawson and Emma spoke of the accident and the time that had passed since then. Thor sat between them, his head turned as if listening to their words, sensing the importance of the moment. Thor had always been the bridge between them, and now he was completing that bridge, allowing them to heal together. Dr. Lewis watched from the sidelines, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought them all together. The healing that had taken place in this room was unlike anything he had ever witnessed before. It was not just the physical progress that had been made, but the emotional healing that had taken root. Officer Lawson, once overwhelmed by his injury, now felt a renewed sense of purpose. Emma, who had been so focused on her own struggle, was now able to see beyond her illness and recognize the power of connection. Thor had shown them both that healing wasn't just about fighting illness or recovering from injury. It was about being present for each other, about offering support and care without judgment. As the day came to an end, Dr. Lewis sat quietly, In his office, reflecting on the extraordinary events that had unfolded, he thought about how far Officer Lawson had come, and how much Emma had grown. He thought about Thor, and the role the dog had played in bringing them all together. The hospital had become a place of healing, not just because of the medical treatments, but because of the connections that had been formed between people, animals, and the bonds they shared. The hospital had changed, and so had Dr. Lewis. He had always believed in the power of medicine, but now he understood that true healing came from the connections we make with each other. And as he left his office that evening, he couldn't help but feel a sense of peace. He knew that this journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, he felt hopeful. The full circle of healing had been completed, and it was more beautiful than he could have imagined. The next day, Officer Lawson and Emma continued to meet regularly. Thor, ever faithful, remained by their side, and together, they walked forward on their journey of recovery, each of them a reminder that healing happens not just through medicine but through love, loyalty, and the deep connections that bind us all.